Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Accommodation Show. This week, I'm joined by the most wonderful woman in the world, Lisa Peterson from L'Abode Accommodation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bart, for having me. I'm so pleased to be here and sharing all my knowledge and expertise over the years. So, yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, look, the reason why I call you the most wonderful woman in the world is because of your passion, because of your can-do attitude. Every time I kind of approach you, say, hey, Lisa, can you help me out with this? You're like, yeah, how do we do it? You're a real driving force in the short-term rental space. You've been in business for 13 years. You've got around about 250 properties under management in 5 different states across Australia. So that's New South Wales, Queensland, Tasmania, Victoria, and the ACT. I did have to check my notes. It's been really great because, I've been in the industry for sort of a short-term rental and sort of accommodation space for 5-6 years. And since our paths crossed, only recently did I realize how much of an impact you've had on our business and what I do through your connections and your goodwill. How important do you reckon that has been to make you as successful as you guys have been?
So when I first set up the business, this was pre-Airbnb, so 13 years ago. This is when Stays sort of just had a platform and Home Away. I had no one back then. You were absolutely winging it. Hotels have been around forever and a day. They've got their platforms and their softwares and, all the properties are under one roof, whereas we're dealing in the short-term rental space, we're dealing with all these different types of caliber of owners. We're dealing with all these different types of caliber of properties. They're not just a cookie cutter set. And then on top of that, we're having to reinvent all of our operations and systems and processes. There's no one-stop shop for anything. The tech stack in our environment is huge and multi-layered. And, and when I sort of found my people in this industry or found someone else doing it, I would, in those early days, I would cling on to them. So Steve Kerr from Hotel-esque was one of my first ones because I actually went for a job with him, and he didn't offer me I didn't get the job with him or something like that. So then I went out and set up the business. Yeah, we've had a really close connection ever since then. But just having that kind of someone you can bounce off, someone that you can ask questions to, someone that you can kind of have a shoulder to cry on, because you can have some pretty bad days in those early years. And I just found that critical. But what I did find in those early years as well is everyone was very closed off about sharing information around their business. But I've always had the ethos is share, because it comes back in absolute troves. And people will open up as well, once you start giving out your intellectual property and telling people how you operate and run your business, And I'm kind of the mindset that if someone wants to do it as well as you or better than you, then go for it, because it's bloody hard. And if you can also give back and share, then I've always been one to sort of be really proud of kind of our industry partners and try and help them out, and that's what we call them. But I've got a huge amount of connections within this industry now, and I think it's it comes from giving back to the industry and being able to tell people, I know what you're going through and I know it's hard and this is how I've done to fix it, and I've had that same, had people give me so many gold nuggets over the years, which I've implemented into my business, which has helped make it profitable. Or, you have those kind of oh my God, why didn't I think of that before? And it just, and it helps elevate our industry as well and make all of our businesses better. So, so that's why I think it's really important.
It's really interesting. There was a post that went up on LinkedIn a couple of days ago by someone sharing data of the top short-term rental companies in Australia. So I think he's actually doing all the world and happened to come to Australia saying, hey, this is the data they have. And I was looking at the top 20 companies in Australia in terms of size. And I think I've pretty much interviewed all of the people in the top 20, if not had them on at Strive at the conference. And everybody in that group is always willing to share and willing to give their information and their knowledge. And I think that the real nugget here is that you give first and then you will receive in 10 times as much information or 10 times the return, because people will see you in a light as a friend rather than as a competitor. That friendship part, right? So you kind of go from kind of information exchange and that sort of thing, but the friendships are genuine, right?
Oh, 100%. Like at Strive, which is an incredible platform to be able to meet these industry people, no one was sitting out of the group, not having anybody to talk to. And you've got people from all walks of life in that room as well. Everybody was just like, the vibe was incredible, wasn't it? It was just natter, 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 natter. Everybody was so excited to be there and had so much to talk about, because it's almost a bit of an offload, because you're in working all day, every day, and facing all these challenges and problems and thinking that no one else has got problems like these, and how, and it's also very industry specific as well, because who else deals with like junkies in house, for 2 weeks at a time and robbing the neighbor's house and breaking into, and stealing other people's cars. Well, who's got those stories? No other industry has that. So when you're able to kind of walk into a room, and these situations are so isolated as well, and they're all so different as well, as no two situations are the same. So to be able to like tell that story to someone, because you can't tell your owners that, you can't tell your guests that, and
you can tell everybody on a podcast though.
You can't tell friends that as well, because sometimes you don't want people knowing that you've got the shit show behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So to walk into a room of people and be able to kind of like offload those stories and how you handled it and dealt with it is gold.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many different facets of it, of that networking. And I think I'm going to keep moving on, because I really want to make sure that we get some real value out of, because we're doing the Building It series. One of the things that we talked about before getting on, we talked about profitability, and it's something that you jumped in at the very start. And you already mentioned profitability and how important that's been to you to be successful and to get to where you are. Let's get a little bit into the story of L'Abode and how you got to where you are, or how it all kind of got started. How did that building journey actually start for you? Because you said that you, of course, at the start, there was no kind of platforms, and it was all kind of the Wild West, trying to figure out what this industry is actually. So you were a pioneer in that way. And you picked up some owners, and then, so what was the journey like for you in those first few years?
Yeah, well, I was going to go back a bit further to sort of like my childhood, but I sort of thought, because that's sort of a big part of what shaped me. Like I grew up with absolutely nothing. I'm here in New Zealand at the moment, back sort of not where we grew up. We grew up on a farm down south, but mum and dad had no money. So we have always had a deep respect for the value of money. So we didn't, mum and dad, like dad was he worked at the meat factory, and mum stayed at home with her 6 kids, because you obviously can't work with 6 kids, as you know now, but we're having one. But, me and my brother and my dad used to do possum trapping in the off season. So one of my earliest memories was going up in the bush and setting possum traps with my brother. So my brother would like knock the possums on the head, and he would sling the possums in my backpack, and then we would go and set the traps up in the mountain. Now that feels very, I don't know what you call it, like, archaic, I suppose. But back then, there wasn't a lot of jobs and whatnot, and mum and dad couldn't afford to
So the whacking of the possums was there. The government was incentivizing you guys to do it. Is that right?
Well, Dad used to skin the possums, and Dad used to sell the possum skins to food on the table. And so we were very hunter-gatherer family as well. So Dad used to be up in the hills, like hunting, like all the food that was on the table was caught by either pigs, deer, duck.
Wow.
Fishing. Yeah. And if we wanted anything, we had to go and fetch it ourselves. So we did live on my grandparents' sheep farm. So another way that we used to like make money as kids was we used to like pluck dead sheep and then sell the wool. And so we would use that to buy clothes, or for Christmas, I would, for my birthday, I'd always get my school uniform as my Christmas present, or my birthday present, and that's all we would get. Yeah, because we just didn't, that sort of like was my very first job from a very young age. We've always worked really hard as a family and just as a person, and just, and always had that worry that we would never, would never be able to afford anything. We'd never able to go on school trips or school camps or anything like that. So I never really wanted to be like that when I grew up. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where that deep respect for money comes about, and just not being frivolous with it.
Mm-hmm.
But that sort of led me into kind of, and I never went to university. I was never any good at.
Do you think drove you because you have a fear of not having money, or do you think it drove you more because you wanted to show that you could be successful?
I'm not a person that takes pride in being successful at all. I think in those, like as a kid, when you're like, you weren't able to go and do anything and you couldn't afford anything, there was always that fear that, of not having any money. So the fear comes from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so everything gets counted and noted and reconciled in your head. And I think I've always sort of, had a good mindset for that as well, and always enjoyed having it, and working out what you're going to do with it.
Yeah.
And then, so I was sort of, I haven't been diagnosed as dyslexia, but I was always in the cabbage class at school and got put down years. And then I left school when I was like 16 and just worked in the sheds, and, and then moved up to Queenstown and worked in hotels for like 4 years doing housekeeping. And I really loved that actually, but I wanted more for myself. So I wanted to work my way up to doing reception. So did receptionist, and then worked out that they were just a bunch of bitches on the front desk. And I thought I'd rather go back to housekeeping and just stay there instead of like trying to work my way up in the hotel corporate world. So after that, I then got offered a job actually in hire equip, which was like, servicing chainsaws, putting trailers on the back of cars, putting snow chains on. I was one of the first girls in New Zealand to get that job on the front desk, just on the front counter there. And I worked with a bunch of blokes, and I really loved working in that environment because there was no bitchiness. It was tell it how it is, get the job done. This is how it's done. And so I worked there for like 4 years, and then met my husband, Rob, who kind of like wanted more for me out of life. And so he was like encouraging me to like take this job at the Mediterranean market, which is now called Royal Oakburn or whatnot. But so I did office management there. But that led me into, there was a business upstairs called Touch of Spice, Jackie Spice, who she had a business in Queenstown. She pioneered the holiday rental business in Queenstown, and her girls would be running down getting bananas and all sorts of things for their guests. And I was like, what is this business? And I thought it was a really cool name too, like Touch of Spice. It was like, what is this? It sounds really, interesting. And found out that, she was doing renting out people's houses and making money off it, or getting the owner's income on their holiday homes. And this was back 20 years ago, where like this was unheard of. And I was like, man, I need to work for this business. So I pestered her and ended up getting a part-time job doing weekends, and then did, in Queenstown, you have to work 60 hours to get ahead to even just make ends meet, because it's such an expensive place to live. But did weekends there, and then and loved that, and thought that was such a cool idea, and that's where the love for holiday rentals and real estate sort of come from. I was like, that is such a cool business, and but then we moved to Wellington, and I was like, right, I want to find a business like Jackie Spice is there. What's there? Nothing was there. So went and worked for a real estate agency, and got a job there doing property management, and love that actually.
Yeah.
And
So that would have been like a traditional finding tenants.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was managing sort of over 200 properties, and got some. That's a whole nother story for another day. Just managing the properties there,
Sure.
but just continued to have that love for real estate, but was continuing to try and seek out kind of the short-term rental space and who was in it and who was doing it, and trying to find a job in that, but couldn't find anything there either. So we moved to. My partner got relocated to Sydney And so we moved over there, and I thought, perfect, surely Sydney, there's going to be some holiday rental operators there. No one except for Steve Kerr from Hotel S sort of doing in that sort of space. But I found a lady, Eloise Terrell, in Bronte, and she was managing 100 and some properties there and dabbling in the holiday rental side of things.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to get out of it. I wanted to get into it. And I was like, no, Eloise, I've seen it be done before. We can make money off this. It's really, and she was like, nah, too hard, too totally different to long-term rentals.
Yes.
It's, you get people ringing you up on Christmas Day and you end up ruining their Christmas Day because their oven doesn't work and the property's not clean and the linen's dirty. And she's like, nah, don't want to entertain that. It's too hard. So anyway, a few things sort of happened there, but I ended up leaving Eloise. And anyway, we come back sort of like a week later and she's like, what are you going to do, Lisa? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I'm just going to go and get a job doing property management and then sort of see where that takes me. But that amount of space gave me enough kind of headspace to kind of go back to that kind of like light bulb moment and that voice in the back of your head that tells you holiday rentals. So I did have that light bulb moment and I was like, oh my God, this is the time. This is now. I've got $10,000 in the bank. And this is like, I've got no job. I need to go and set up this holiday rental business. So I went to Eloise and I said, hey, I think I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and get a part-time job to pay the bills and pay the rent. And I'm going to set up a holiday rental business. She was so good. She was like, awesome. Like, here's the contract that we had. That was an absolute sort of, myth. And here's kind of like the 5 leads that I let go. They were planning on opening Christmas this season, but I told them that we're not doing it anymore. Give them a call. Gave them a call and just it snowballed. It was like 1 property, 2 properties, 3 properties. And at the time as well, I had a part-time job managing 120 properties out in Parramatta. And I had to get a bus train there, bus train back. And then set up the business. So literally for 3 years, I was working for like 5 in the morning until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, 7 days straight for 3 years, setting up this business. I had so many highs, so many lows, made so many mistakes. But within the first 6 months of setting up the business, I had 90 properties that I had to service. I had a part-time contract doing property management for 3 months, started in July, finished in December. August or something like that. It felt like it was a 3-month contract. And on the 20th of December, which was the last day of my contract doing normal property management, I had 90 properties going in to service those properties. But back then we did concierge. So I was doing airport pickups and drop-offs. I didn't have a car. I just used a go-get to get around. So you'd go and pick up these guests at the airport and all of a sudden the luggage wouldn't fit in the back of the car. So you'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, this is so embarrassing. And it's going to have to get a cab now. I'll pay for it. Yeah. I'd have porta cots under my arm and running to go and get the go-get, and then the go-get would have a flat tire or no petrol, so I'd be late for all my appointments. And it was just everything felt so hard. The cleaners would just let us down all the time. But throughout those kind of first 3 years, everything I did was like every problem that I had, I made sure I put a process in to fix it. And I think that's kind of the first key thing that I want to give back to the audience is if there's a problem within your business, write it down and find a way to fix it. And operations was kind of my strength at the time because I did find a problem and I did fix it. And I think
and creating a scalable solution, right? So that if that problem comes up again, you've got a strategy to deal with it.
100%, always looking at it on a scalable point of view and always making decisions from a scalable point of view as well. Because, you can look at doing your own linen or having your own cleaners. But at that time, it was not scalable for us to do it because, the linen would either come back dirty and then we'd have to replace it, or it'd come back ripped and we'd have to replace it. And just the costings of that at the time was not viable as well. Yeah, or, if you're looking at sort of doing all these fancy things for the guests, like concierge was the first thing that we scrapped because there's absolutely no money in concierge. No matter what way you look at it, how you wrap it up, what you do, there's no money in it. You spend a hell of a lot of time working on doing all these concierge and being, that for the guests, but like if you're doing $100 reservation, you're making $10 out of it, but you've made 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 calls, spent an hour on it. Is your time worth $10 an hour? Probably not. So yeah, that was the first thing that went, and then we tried to find an outsourced person. If someone did want it, they can go straight to them. That does it. To someone that
They
does do
just
it.
pay directly,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Yeah, fascinating story, and I'm glad that you shared it, because for me, one thing that's obvious is that you're hardworking, and it does. My direct example of this is seeing you prepare to co-MC with me at Strive, and the level of detail and work that you went into for something that a lot of people would find a bit trivial. They'd be like, "Oh, I'll just get up. I'll just say welcome this person and get going." You actually put a lot of work, prep, and thought into the things that you take on. So there's a hard work. The other part, which is really interesting, is the luck. And it was by chance that that Jackie Spice came into your life, and then you got to see that business. And had you not seen that business, then maybe this whole thing wouldn't have happened, right? So there are those, and then there's different relationships. Now, I believe that you do create your own luck, but I know that most founders that I talk to, they say you do need the luck as well to come into play to get you to where you are, because if it doesn't, all it takes is a few things and it just will never happen. And back in the day when you were getting started, there was no YouTube channel to teach you about how to grow your business and how to set these things up. So I think that people have a massive advantage. The only disadvantage you have is everybody else has access to the same information. What's interesting is when people start their businesses now, they're going to be approaching it differently to how you approached it, right? Because they have the access to the information. And one of the things that you mentioned at the start was around the profitability part. And obviously, when you were starting, like you just said, that you were doing stuff that was not profitable at all. So the concierge part, it didn't kind of make sense. You weren't making money. And I'm sure that if you were to, or I'll ask you, if you were to put on a hat today and to start building again, at what stage would you include the profitability part and sort of like really start thinking in that way? And is it something that maybe you should have started thinking about way earlier in your journey?
I think when you first start out, you've got to do whatever it takes and take on whatever it takes. We took on the shittiest owners. We took on the shittiest properties. We took on we basically took on anything and everything. I think I was like single, no kids, 27. So I had heaps of energy about me. But I know that a lot of people that are starting this, they may have, I needed to make it work in terms of the finances as well, because I didn't have mum and dad to fall back on. I didn't have huge savings pool or anything like that. But I think, that whole working harder thing, that was something that I had been brought up with my whole life. But I think working smarter is a better way to work these days. I haven't got anything off the top of my head in order to kind of contribute to that, but just thinking about how you can make things more efficiently, I suppose, within your business instead of working harder. So, but in terms of what you're talking about with the cost savings things, so as soon as I got wind of these, like knowing what your time is worth to you is a really important thing to measure. Because as soon as I got wind of VAs or virtual assistants over in the Philippines, I was on it with that, because I cannot be sitting here doing a repetitive task for 10 times a day, every day, which, you add up that time and just say your time's worth $50 or $100 or $200, you add that up, that's a lot of time that you can actually do. It'll take you 20 minutes to do one system, one process, hand that off to someone that you're paying $10 an hour to or $5 an hour to, and get them to do that task for you. So in those early days, I realized that that's the best way to scale. But obviously AI has changed everything all over again. But, for the ones that aren't using virtual assistants at the moment, you've got to look at your time like that, and the time of your staff, of the people that are working, in Australia or New Zealand or in the US. You've got to look at if anybody is in your business is doing a repetitive task that they're doing multiple times a day that takes more than 5 minutes, that has to be handed off to either AI or someone
Or
based in
system
the
or
Philippines
process.
or
Yeah,
Nepal
got
or
it.
India. Yeah.
Do you within the business right now? Because how many people in your sort of employ?
Yeah, so we've got 10 based in Australia, and then we have 10 based in the Philippines. So
Gotcha.
I've always found that that's a really good measure, is having 50% offshore and then 50% on the ground.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
And then, so for the ones that, so for your 10 staff, that obviously the cost is far greater to you, than you do want to look at their tasks and then find help and support, and either through technology or through more human capital to get those tasks done. And you
yeah.
said, are you training your team to identify those tasks? Are you doing one-on-one meetings with them to find those choke points where they are spending too much time on a task? How do you measure tasks that are taking too long for people to do, or that are repetitive? That's the other thing. People say, I do this repetitive thing, but maybe they don't realize it because it just becomes so ingrained in what they do. Yeah, sure, I go into LinkedIn every day and then I respond to 10 posts, like that's a repetitive task. I'm doing it all the time, and we could potentially outsource it. So how do we find those opportunities or those potential issues?
I think if you have got staff that are always saying, I don't have the time, is a really good, because everybody will make every excuse to not do something and blame it on time, which is not a good enough excuse. But also spot checking their work, or having those 3 monthly check-ins and performance reviews, and also having KPIs. But I think the biggest red flag is someone saying, "Oh, I didn't have the time to do that." So that's your opportunity to check in. Okay, cool. What? So I get all of my management staff to send me a weekly report of everything that they're doing. And I will often catch repetitive tasks in the task list of all the things that they're
Yeah,
sending back to me.
why this over and over
Yeah.
again?
Yeah. And so I'll email them back and I'll question them. Hey, I've seen that you've done that again this week. Or how are you managing that? Are you giving that to a VA? Are you doing it? What's happening there? So, yeah. So those weekly kind of tasks reports get sent back to me. But a really good way to measure it is we use a tool called Monday.com. And
Hmm.
a lot of people should know what that is. But every task that every staff member in our business does basically gets measured and put onto Monday.com. So
Yeah.
every call that happens with an owner, everything gets updated. And then they just go in at the end of the week and they'll, tick all the 50 things that they've done and send that off to me in an email.
Right.
And that's another great way to measure it, because you're like, and me, like, I'm quite like I've got an operational mindset. So I'll look at it and go, oh, I'll question every task that anyone's doing, and then go back to them with the question, hey, who is doing that? Are you doing that? Has an SOP been created for that? If not, look, you need to do an SOP and hand that off to a VA.
Yeah. And so for those that don't know what Monday.com is, it's actually a database stroke task management tool. They market themselves as doing everything. There are some things that they don't do well, so don't get fooled by the hype.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very robust platform with a lot of versatility, so you can do a lot with it. And it's a lot kind of drag and drop, and as a business how you can do it. We use Asana within our business,
Yeah.
which is,
Sounds,
is another big one that a lot of people use. And then there are a lot more complex systems out there, but very, very useful. When you're using Monday, do you track time spent on a task, or are you just marking the number of tasks?
So we have a time tracker for all of our team, and that's called Hubstaff. And
Yep.
basically, that does screen grabs and does a percentage of output based on keystrokes and mouse strokes.
Yeah.
And we have a report that gets sent to us every week on the percentage. Just say a high, someone
Yeah.
working at a
Right.
very, yeah,
Wow. Is that,
that's
I
it.
really want to talk to you about this, because I know maybe that's not exactly where the episode was going to go, but I think this is really valuable. Because is this for your onshore team as well
Both,
as offshore? Both.
both.
And then
Yeah,
what kind of resistance do you get from the team to be tracking them to that sort of degree? It's without, I don't have a better way of putting it, but it
I
feels a little
know.
bit micromanagey.
Yeah. If you were sitting in an office, your manager would know exactly what you're doing, where you are, and what you're doing. It's a privilege to work from home. And you're not wasting that time driving in and driving out. Any new staff that comes on board, they've got no problem with it, because you can pitch it so that it works in, like, the business is, we're pulling out $2 million in, staff wages. We need to be able to record that and see that. We also need to be able to see, like, what, your output. So the resistance side of things, when I rolled it out, and this was probably about 7 years ago, there were some people that were all for it, because they were the high performers that know that they work really hard and they want to prove that they work really hard. But then there was others that were just like, oh, it feels really intrusive, and it feels like you guys are, I don't know, like micromanaging me or just checking in on me. And it's like, yeah, we had to kind of really do the pitch that, and it's not, it's, if you're doing the right thing, why wouldn't you want us saying it,
Sure.
So if you are working and doing what you're supposed to be doing, why wouldn't you want us to see it? Why wouldn't you want us to see how well you're performing and how much of a good worker you are and how much output you're putting into the business? And you kind of want people that have that mindset as well working in your business. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And you're playing in a space that it's got a huge amount of controversy. So if we look at the Musks of the world saying, hey, everyone back in the office so we can kind of monitor what you're doing. And I think that there's a lot of businesses that don't monitor what their staff are doing whilst they're on the books, right? Whilst they're earning their wage. And I think that there could be some learning there. And I think it's fascinating. I'm 100% sure that based on this conversation, people are going to approach you, Lisa, and say, how do you do this? How does it work? Because I think it's really, really good practice and something which is useful. Now, Lisa, we have a problem because we're friends and we could talk forever. These episodes are shorter, so the problem that we've got is we've got halfway, and I kind of feel that we're almost due for 2 episodes. So coming back and finishing the second part of the Building It series, I think that's what we're going to do, because I think that there's a lot more that you were intending to also talk about. Am I got that right?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a few key areas. I wanted to touch more on that staff performance actually as well, and the productivity, because that makes up probably at least 60-70% of your operating costs. So you have to be so vigilant with that and measure it. And there's a few other tools I can give back on that as well. But and just the how to make your business profitable. So, and I know we've run out of time, which is a bit of a shame.
No, it's not a shame. It's great because it means that we've got some really interesting stuff. And I think that I would prefer to give people a little bit of a tidbit, a bit of a snapshot at this episode, and they can come back and follow the journey and follow the story. And potentially also, if anyone's got questions along the way, you can ask now, and we'll record again maybe in about 3-4 weeks, and then we can actually add those to the next episode, because there's so much more depth to your business and to the way that you've built it, which I think it's really necessary that we do circle back on that. If I was to go back to the top of what we've kind of covered today, I think that for you, the Building It was massive hard work and a history of that, aligning yourself with the industry that you're interested in and the kind of product that you're interested in. I think those are sort of the core things. And I think that I'd love to go back to building the team and kind of going from that sort of 90 properties, kind of what happened next. So we'll do that next time. Are there any final thoughts and tips from what we talked about today that you think we need to summarize or come back on, or any new tips that you want to give anybody?
One thing I did want to give back is you can't make money off 20% management fees. I'm always singing the song. You have to be having other extras on top. You have to be having your 30% margin on your cleaning, on your linen, on the wine that you give out to the guests. I've got some tips on how to build in, a wine and a hamper for the guests, but not have the guest pay for that. So I think, and that's where the profitability sits within your business. If you're sitting at 10% net profit, it's not enough. You need to be sitting at 20% net profit, and you need to be sitting at about 50% gross profit. So have a look at your numbers on that, and then I can maybe in the next episode I can give you some tips on how to streamline those. Yeah.
Folks, I'll tell you one thing that I do know. The reason why Lisa's talking about this is that you can run on a much tighter margin, but you're not really running a business. You've got a job. If you want to run a business and have teams of people and to build something that's scalable, you really need to make sure that the profitability is there. Lisa, you're amazing. We're going to wrap this one up. Folks, if you are listening on the YouTube, make sure that you give us a like, a thumbs up, share this around, share it with people, share Lisa's passion and story with everybody, because I'm sure that they will benefit from it. If you're tuned in on iTunes or on Spotify, then also leave us a review. You can communicate with us on there. Lisa, thanks so much for your time so far, and we'll catch you again really soon.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Bart.
Take it easy.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye.